And you're right, Charlie, if you're fighting all the time, if you're using those moments when you have the microphone, which for a president is a lot of the time, but if you're using the bully pulpit to wage all of these wars with all these different people, how are you ever going to sell your agenda? One of the startling things about this whole health care debacle has been we never heard in a consistent or coherent way from the president why we should all buy into this. He never made the case. And he has to be able to make the case because he's got the loudest megaphone.
Susan, can he make the case? I mean, at what point we have expected him to change at different times, and we have at many times said, well, that was the final straw, but it has never been the final straw.
Well, that's true. And, of course, the politics of grievance are powerful, but the politics of grievance do not change the facts on the ground in people's lives. And it seems to me that one of the things that Donald Trump has struggled most with is that we have a system with a lot of checks and balances. And if you want to get an immigration ban into place, it has to pass constitutional muster in the courts. And if you want to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, you have got to do it through Congress. You can't just do it with the stroke of a pen. So if at the end of the day he continues to have anger at Washington, but he doesn't have anything to show for what he's done in people's lives, that doesn't strike me as being a powerful political message. And, you know, we have seen presidents run against their party in the past. Bill Clinton famously did triangulation when he got into trouble, but he built up relationships with Republicans, even as he was attacking congressional Democrats. We haven't seen President Trump do that kind of maneuver that would give him the standing and the ability to actually get things done that affect people's lives.
We talk about the confirmation of a Supreme Court justice, Bob. Where would you put the fact that he pulled out of the climate accord? Obviously, in terms of his base, it pleased some of them. But in terms of his reputation around the world, it obviously had a significant impact.
It has. And I think that decision is like several other decisions that are revealing of how this presidency has unfolded. The Republican agenda has been stalled. Health care, taxes, they haven't happened. What has happened is President Trump's agenda. On executive authority, he's used that to go after the travel ban, to put forward his own immigration policy, to move forward on more nationalist trade policies, and when it comes to climate change, to retreat from the Paris Accords. So you see him in the White House using his executive powers to do what he wants. But when it comes to Congress, he isn't really following through with what Republicans want.
Let me just extend that question, Frank. Between January 20th, when the president took office, and today, how has our reputation around the world changed?
It's changed entirely, and the Paris Accord is an example. Donald Trump has sent a message, I think, to the world or to our traditional allies that you can I think what he means to be saying to them is you can no longer take advantage of us. But I think what all of them are hearing is you can no longer count on us. And if you listen to what Western European diplomats say, if you listen to what some of Angela Merkel has said, there is a feeling that we are no longer exercising the kind of global leadership that was expected of us. Now, a lot of Donald Trump's base, I think, likes this because they feel we were the world's chumps. And to some extent, that's understandable.
And
but
globalization and all of that did not do them.
But I worry going forward because without us, who else? I mean, when you talk about Donald Trump's relationship with Putin and Russia, what really has most devastated me about that is the moral equivalence he sometimes draws between the United States and Russia. And I mention that because there's a reason why we have always seized the role of leadership in the world, and it's because we do have sturdier, better values. We're worthy of that leadership, and I worry that sometimes the message that he sends out is we're not worthy of that leadership.
I think that in Poland, President Trump received a wild reception, that he's well-loved, again, with the countryside as opposed to the capital. In Japan, they are very happy that he is engaged on North Korea in a way that President Obama was. The lead from behind, red line, JV stuff of the last 8 years did not resonate with a lot of America, and the America First, rebuild the fleet, make NATO pay their way, does. And so this separation on foreign affairs matters a great deal, but not if it's obscured by domestic failure at home. And so Frank and I could have a long conversation about this, but I am happy with his foreign policy right now, very happy.
Susan?
You take it, Hugh mentioned Poland, so the president gave a speech that got a great reception in Poland, and yet now, since then, we've seen these massive demonstrations on behalf of the rule of law in Poland, and the White House hasn't spoken up on it. That's been surprising, and I think that's a And I think it's a sign of a more limited American role when it comes to asserting American values of democracy and civil liberties. And I do think that whatever happens with President Trump on domestic policy, he has reordered the U.S. role in the world to a more limited role. I think France and Germany and even Canada are responding to that now and stepping up on their own. It's a changed world because of the Trump presidency.
Bob, you have covered him from the beginning. How has he changed, or has he not changed, and therefore that is what we should expect for the rest of this term?
He has not changed at all. This is a president who is the same person I encountered back in 2011, backstage at CPAC, in 2013 when he first started thinking about 2016. And I think in particular with foreign policy, we're seeing the flames of his youth when he used to talk about the world with his father, Fred, and his father would tell him, and you read this in every book about Trump, and he also talked, when I've spoken to the president about this before he was president, his father thought the world, America was losing in the world, that the trade deficit was huge. The president gets all this credit for having these similar views on trade in the world going back decades, and he's really echoing his father, Fred Trump's view of the world in many respects, and he has brought them to the White House, and this is someone who has coveted being an anti-establishment figure throughout his entire adult life. He's always been leery of the establishment, and so he continues to be leery of the neoliberal world order, of the world order that's been really created and led by the United States since World War II. He has never really seen the world through that prism that so many previous leaders have.
Hewitt, I can't continue this conversation without mentioning Samuel Huntington. Is where Trump taking us exactly
Class
the prophecy?
Of civilization? No, I don't think so yet, although I think he's much more popular in Israel than President Obama was, and I do believe that we are looking at a very long August in the Middle East right now, as evidenced by the events of the last 2 weeks. I will note there's one big change that maybe Robert didn't note, and that is during the campaign, President Trump with his own communications director. He went on all the networks, he did all the shows, to quote famously President Trump. He has now reduced his on-camera visibility, and I think not to his advantage. It's great to sit down with Maggie Haberman and Glenn Thrush and Peter Baker. It's great to do one-on-ones with favorite people. But I think he ought to be back out there as obvious and as often as he was during the campaign. It worked then. Why would he change it now?
On that note, thank you very much. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Frank. We'll be right back.